Hello and welcome. My name is Sam Visnic from endyourbackpainnow.com/blog, and today the topic is going to involve the anterior pelvic tilt approach to resolving disc herniations. As I've talked about previously in other videos as well as blog posts, is that when there's a disc herniation, the most common form of it is the posterior disc bulge, which means that the bulge is going back toward the nerve root, and any amount of flexion in the spine, which is a bending forward or a rounding, will increase the disc pain as the bulge contributes, or as the flexion contributes to increased disc pressure, thus forcing the bulge into the nerve root even further. So again, when I talk about disc herniations, I'm mostly referring here to the posterior variety. The anterior ones are rare and usually are the end result of some type of trauma, whether you've been in a car accident or something has fallen on you and has created that. So just be aware that I'm referring to the posterior variety of the anterior pelvic tilt as we talk about this, or the disc bulging. So the corrective protocol is to avoid all flexion motions. And again, to review, flexion would be actually looking at the lumbar spine rounding forward. So anyone who has a disc bulge well knows that that type of motion, flexion, increases the pain, particularly if you have pain going down the backside of the buttocks or down to the hamstrings or even further. So we want to avoid that motion at all costs. So the corrective motion is actually the reverse motion. And many times you see me talk on my blog here is the correction of anterior pelvic tilt, which is a form of postural dysfunction that is common with back pain sufferers. Now, we need to make the distinction here. Excessive anterior pelvic tilt can be bad for back pain sufferers and is often the cause of back pain. However, if you have a disc herniation, the posterior version, anterior pelvic tilt will give you relief. So as you can see, that there's no one-size-fits-all solution to back pain. It depends on what kind of condition you have. So, with a posterior disc bulge, the safest position, as I've mentioned in one of my previous blog posts, is either going to be a neutral spinal position or anterior. So the neutral spinal position is found by looking at the ASIS, which is the bone on the front of the pelvis. It's quite prominent. The PSIS, which is the bone that's about 1 inch lateral to the spine, and we're looking at the angle of these two. So normally, with most people, there's an excessive anterior pelvic tilt. There's quite a bit. Now, if you have a disc bulge, usually the pelvis is either in a neutral position or even slightly anterior. However, it's not enough to cause pain relief. So what we need to do is we need to increase the amount of anterior pelvic tilt until you feel some relief. So from this position here, if I were to imagine that my pelvis was a bucket of water, if I was pouring water out the front of my body onto my toes, this would cause my pelvis to rock forward into an anterior pelvic tilt. And as you notice, I didn't move my upper body forward. I kept my upper body still while my pelvis rotated forward. This increases the arch in the lower back, called extension of the lumbar spine, and decreases the pressure on the disc. Okay? The opposite motion, which would be called a posterior pelvic tilt, would be if water was pouring backward, hitting my heels. So if I performed a posterior pelvic tilt, usually in an individual with a posterior disc bulge, this increases pain levels. This is not what we want to do. So what we want to make sure is we increase anterior pelvic tilt until we have a degree of relief, and this is essentially the position that we want to spend most of our time in. Now, it doesn't have to be fully locked out in the spine, although in some individuals they need to go that far in order to get relief. So we want to find the ideal position, either in neutral spinal alignment or slightly increasing extension until we get a degree of pain relief, and then we want to train ourselves to be in that posture as much as possible. Now, how often should we be in that posture? As much as possible, all the time. And that's not only from standing in line at the bank to getting in and out of your car, trying to hold that lumbar curve when you move, but also picking up things off the ground, as many of you may have children, and bending over in flexion and picking up a weight that's, depending on how old your child is, can be enough to cause increased disc pressure and make your situation worse. So this anterior tilt-based protocol is ideal for disc herniations and helping them heal. Now keep in mind that with a disc herniation, it's not only, there's not much you can do to try and heal the disc particularly, as there is, it's a situation of just not adding more insult to injury. Meaning we just have to decrease spinal pressure and keep that pressure decreased as to not make the disc herniation worse, and then time will be our ally in healing the disc. So I hope that's helpful, and my name is Sam Visnic again, and make sure you come back and visit my blog at endyourbackpainnow.com/blog.